What do you got?
You have no hair.
I know. You like it that way?
If you kept it more coiffed.
I'm an extremist.
You are. That sounds scary.
It does sound scary. Welcome to the Extremist Podcast.
You're supposed to be a demon?
They're pretty extreme, aren't they?
They are.
Demons, I would assume.
Yeah.
I haven't really met very many, just the one I'm married to.
I knew this where you're going with this.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yaniz Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to talk about their personal connection to a current or classic release. This episode is my annual birthday gift to myself on the podcast, so this is a Rob's Choice. This is the second time we're doing this particular format for, the second time under this format that we're doing this, the Rob's Choice episode. Last year, I did a Who Framed Roger Rabbit episode with my mom, Jeannine Yaniz, who's been on the show before. And this episode, I am honored to welcome back to the show Kai Yaniz, my wife, to talk about the 40-Year-Old Virgin. Kai, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for having me again.
Of course. And people listening to this will have just heard our Batman Forever crooked commentary. And yeah, they're getting a lot of back-to-back Kai here on accident.
That's how it happened.
Well, yeah. Well, it was I mentioned on that episode, it was your idea to bring up the Batman Forever thing. It was supposed to be a September release, but then with Joel Schumacher's passing, you were like, we should do that. And I was like, all right, fine, we'll do that now. And gonna get that out of the way, per se. Plus, I think it was fortuitous timing generally. So this week we're going to talk about The 40-Year-Old Virgin, which is one of my favorite comedies. As we said, this is my choice episode. So I'm really the focus. You're kind of here, for people that didn't listen to last year's episode, you're kind of really here as more of a facilitator so that I can talk to myself, I guess. Just because I can't host and kind of interview myself on things. So
yeah, you might look like a crazy person.
Well, yeah, that's true. So I guess to start with, before we get into the movie itself, what is your experience with the 40-Year-Old Virgin and Judd Apatow's sort of legacy of comedy that's come after it? And this is also the 15th anniversary of the film as well.
With its when it premiered in, you said August?
August,
2005?
Yeah, like August 19, 18, something like that.
Yeah, so it's still a summer movie.
Right.
Too. My experience with 40-Year-Old Virgin is I did not see it in the movie theater. And I think actually my dad at a time was making copies of DVDs.
Doesn't he still do that?
Yeah, yes, maybe. But I don't know if he's doing the DVDs.
You're not living. Yeah, Redbox, I guess.
He doesn't do that.
He doesn't do Redbox? Anyway,
no.
we're beside the point.
And he gave me kind of a pile of copied CDs or DVDs, and one of them was 40-Year-Old Virgin. So I think it was when I was in college. It was like my first year at my alma mater is University of Central Florida. So I don't know. Sometime on a weekend, I put the DVD of 40-Year-Old Virgin in and watched it, and yeah, and I mean I thought it was okay. Like it didn't really resonate with me very much, and I think at that time I wasn't a Judd Apatow fan. I don't even know if I am now. Well,
we should run through his filmography then, his movies. So he's done 40-Year-Old Virgin, which obviously is the focus of this episode, so we'll talk about quite a bit. Knocked Up, which you do like Knocked Up, right?
I do. Yeah, Knocked Up, I laughed hysterically in the movie theater. That one was really funny.
I don't think I saw that in theaters either, because I didn't see 40-Year-Old Virgin, which we'll get into. Funny People, which I don't think you've
I have not
seen that, right?
I hear it's really like a very
it's
touching
heavier.
Adam Sandler
It's more, yeah, it's more dramatic than comedy in a way. I saw it once. I think I blind bought it, saw it once, and then I haven't really gone back to revisit it because it wasn't what I was expecting. But I that would be a good one for us to watch just because you've never seen it, and it's been so long since I've watched it. This is 40. Which we both, I think we enjoyed that.
Yeah, we even own a copy of it.
I don't
think
DVD.
we even opened it.
No, maybe not. It's like that's a good.
We saw the movie theater.
Yeah, that we saw in the movie theaters, and then Trainwreck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which we think we both enjoyed.
We did.
Quite a bit.
We saw that was a double feature.
What was the other movie we saw? Let's Be Cops? No, that was Lucy. And we were like,
Was it?
Let's Be
wasn't
Cops
it
is so much
Pixels,
better.
Was it?
Oh, I don't know.
After.
It was the same year, so it could
Yeah.
be. Anyway,
Anyway.
Trainwreck is also good. We need to revisit that. Amy Schumer, I think, is really funny when she has the right direction. And his most recent one, The King of Staten Island, which we haven't seen yet.
And that's a Netflix original?
No, it's. I think it's just a regular on demand because it couldn't go to theaters
Right.
because we're living in the pre-apocalypse right now. So we're living in like the first Mad Max movie before things go all like wild and Road Warrior style. So yeah, so we don't have any comments on that movie. I think we need to. I'm curious to see it though because I am generally an Apatow fan. I do think that you know his movies do tend to go a little too long. I think they do hew way more from a sort of I don't know, male stereotype perspective. This movie especially.
That might be the other reason it didn't resonate with me.
Yeah,
as much.
well, this is a very male lens movie.
But we'll get there.
Which we'll get, obviously. There's quite a bit to say there as well. So it was also, I think, for me, I didn't see this in theaters because for some reason, you know, well, not for some reason. It came out the same summer as Wedding Crashers. And that looked really, really stupid to me. And they're both sex comedy.
I think
they're
I
both
may
like
have seen that actually before 40-Year-Old Virgin.
You probably did. I didn't. I don't think. I don't know if I saw it because I didn't see that in theaters either because I don't like Vince Vaughn. We were just coincidentally talking about that earlier today. I don't know how Vince Vaughn came up, but I said something like, I thought you said Vince Vaughn. I'm like, yeah, no.
Singing
He's like,
a song, I think.
I'm not a fan of Vince Vaughn or really that kind of movie very much generally. So I think I just kind of mashed them together in my head. And so I didn't get to this for a long time. And and just when I did it was sort of on VHS and watching. I think my Freddie and my dad were there, and it was you know it's a movie that resonated with me a lot for reasons we'll get into.
You saw 40-Year-Old Virgin on VHS?
Was it VHS? I guess it was DVD at that point.
I
DVD
guess like
at that point.
right around
it was
that
about
time,
to be.
yeah.
That was when VHS was completely phased out.
Yeah.
But I saw it on home video, like we rented it. Is what I mean. And yeah, I don't know. It resonated with me pretty strongly, but then more so as time has gone on. So I guess, do we have anything else specifically you want to talk about other than the movie itself? Anything else with Apatow? Or I was not really familiar with Steve Carell at this point, except for Bruce Almighty, because I didn't watch the Daily Show. I think he was on that. This was right around The Office. He had just started The Office, I think, a couple years before this, right?
That sounds
Like 2003?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't familiar. So these were all new people to me. I wasn't familiar with, obviously, Seth Rogen or Paul Rudd, I guess. I sort of, but not really, because I didn't see Clueless until... I didn't see Clueless until you showed it to me.
Wasn't Paul Rudd also an Anchorman?
I didn't see that in theaters either.
I didn't either. I heard everybody quoting it, but I didn't actually see it.
I was in
around the time of 40-Year-Old Virgin.
I was in my early 20s, but for reasons which we'll get into, I wasn't really social and I wasn't really up to date on stuff. I was sort of in my own little family bubble, so I missed out on like a lot of these things that happened in the early to mid 2000s. I caught up with in the years after that.
Plus, we were college students, and we had a lot of other things going on.
I mean, I guess I didn't.
Well,
really.
that was kind of what was
school,
going on with me. I was in school and really busy, and I was working, and movies weren't my thing to want to just go by myself. And my friends didn't see movies necessarily like that. And
right.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was this around the time? When did Evan Almighty come out?
2007.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was one of the most notorious flops because it cost like $200 million for some reason.
I'm very glad that didn't hurt his movie career.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
For some reason, I thought it was before.
No.
Because
it was after this.
Because I heard so many terrible things about the movie, and I'm like, why would Steve Carell do that?
I didn't see that either. And I love Bruce Almighty, and it was the same director, and I love Steve Carell in this, but even then, I was just like, this looks really stupid. I'll pass, hard pass, and that was a wise decision on my part.
But I don't have anything directly to say about the movie.
Okay. It's not a movie like when we talk about Star Wars or whatever, where it's a lot of preamble to get to it. So it's kind of a pretty straightforward
well, even the title
situation.
is straightforward.
Yeah, I know. That's part of what I love about it too. The poster is just him like looking off in the distance, kind of has a certain naivete and innocence about him.
What about Ernest? Does he look earnest in the picture?
I guess I could see that, Jim Varney style. So, so let's listen before we get into the movie in depth. Let's listen to a little bit of the trailer for 40-Year-Old Virgin right now.
Over the years,
Did you glue this? I wish I had some scissors.
Andy Stitzer has lost a lot of girlfriends.
I'm sorry.
But there's one thing he never lost.
Are you a virgin?
Oh, you are hilarious. This is good.
You're a virgin!
How can you go 40 years and not have sex?
I just kind of stopped trying.
We gotta help the man. We cannot let you go on being a virgin. I'm sorry. You gotta highlight your attributes. Just wax that whole Teen Wolf thing off.
No! Kelly Clarkson! Help! I hate you! Stop smiling!
You look like a man-o'-lantern.
The problem most men have is they don't know how to talk to women.
What am I supposed to say?
Nothing. Just ask questions.
Are you looking for something?
Is there something I should be looking for?
We have a great section of do it yourself.
Do you like to do it yourself?
That was a little bit of the trailer for The 40-Year-Old Virgin, directed by Judd Apatow. So as I said, this came out August 19th, 2005, Freddie's birthday. Not 2005, but August 19th, 2005. It made $109 million domestically and $177 worldwide. And I think this was also, this and The Wedding Crashers, or I guess it's just Wedding Crashers, was kind of the big arrival of R-rated comedies, like a revival of that genre that had been dead for a few years, I think, since like American Pie and Scary Movie, and then it was like 5 years of no big R-rated hit comedies that I can remember, and this kind of kickstarted that subgenre again,
Yeah. No, that is interesting. And you did point on the whole 177 million globally. I think we've talked about it before that comedies don't seem to translate as well globally, because comedy is different based on where you live, your culture, and especially with rated R comedies, I would imagine too, because it really is hard to like translate that, and there's different curse words that are used. A lot of curse words.
Well, it's also like every culture has its own sensibility. So, a foreign movie that comes out here that's a comedy, we don't have the same cultural touchstones that they have. So a lot of comedies based on what you know and what they know, their life in a different country is completely different than in the U.S. and vice versa, which is why a lot of the stuff, the foreign movies that are released here are action or sci-fi, like martial arts things, or like
fantasy?
Horror movies, things like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah, that's an interesting point. That but it hit huge here, and I'm not sure exactly if that was the timing or the poster, like the concept to be like 40 years of no sex. That's fucking crazy, yo. I don't know exactly what the concept of what it was about. I think it's such a basic premise, like you said. It's so. It's so earnest. It's right on its face. It's, everything you need to know about the movie just with that very basic poster and the extremely straightforward title. And I think the magic trick of this movie, and I remember talking with a friend of mine who I still want to get on the podcast at one point. If I remember correctly, he said he didn't want to see this movie for a while because I think he thought it was like making fun of the fact that the character is a virgin.
I thought the same thing when it came out.
Yeah, and that sounds like, well, that's either going to be mean-spirited or stupid. And I think the movie has a lot more going on than that, and I think you don't know that until you give it a chance. So it almost makes me wonder if the total would have been higher if some people that were more dismissive of the film based on the title and its premise would have been more open to checking it out.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And maybe that was my thing too. Maybe that's why I didn't want to watch it.
Right.
And I also didn't know a lot about Judd Apatow. Didn't know that much about Steve Carell.
Well, nobody knew about Judd Apatow. He was a TV guy, Freaks and Geeks and Undeclared, and he'd produced things like you mentioned, Anchorman and such like that. But he'd never directed a movie before this, so this was like his big arrival. So. And
I was like looking at it kind of like a guy movie, like thinking, no, this is gonna be like American Pie.
Right, which also is like not great.
Yeah,
especially now the way it's
American
aged.
Pie.
It's fine. I watched it because everybody watched it, but it wasn't like something that I'm into.
No. But so for you, like, so I said that it didn't really resonate with me, and I mean, getting a little bit older and more mature, and we watched it recently. I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, I can see the charm in this. But what was it for you?
Well, how much of the way you see it now is based on the fact that you know that I enjoy it and the reasons that I enjoy it? Like, how much of that is based on that? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there were some parts of the movie, you know, that were watching it recently, and I was feeling kind of offended.
Oh, well, yes.
Yeah.
We'll
and
get
that
to that.
I feel like I feel more offended now
because
than
of the
I did
hashtag.
The first time I watched it, and then the second time I watched it with you.
I think we'll get to that in more detail later. But I think the most offensive, like in that respect, is the lion has a code in his DNA. It says "tackle the gazelle," and believe it or not, every man, Romany Malcos, I'm quoting him. Every man has written in his DNA, tackle drunk bitches. I think that's probably the part where you're like, wow, what the fuck is that about? And granted, that character is supposed to be the most like wildly misogynistic of the bunch, but it's just, even now, it's like, wow, I don't think that would fly. There'd be big blowback. Judd Apatow would be canceled if that happened now, I guess is my point.
Yeah, and I mean, even Steve Carell's character was like what? Really? But I mean, he still went ahead and tried to do that.
Because he doesn't know any better. He literally doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So you were asking about my thing. So when this came out, I was 22, and let's see. I was in between. I had done, I had just graduated or was about to graduate from undergrad in college, and I was very isolated, like I was sort of alluded to earlier. I was very family-based. I had extreme anxiety. I had really bad acne. So I was very antisocial and very cut off, and I didn't really have much of a social life at all in college. I was a late driver, like late bloomer as far as driving, because I was scared of that. So a lot of elements of this character kind of delayed emotional maturity and sort of stunted growth in that regard. And I hadn't really dated at all at that point. And it wasn't until a few years later that I even really tried to do that. And, watching this movie at that point in my early to mid 20s, it kind of played to me like a cautionary tale. It was like, if I don't work on my shit, this is going to be me. I had toys in my room like that. I had embarrassing posters and stuff or whatever.
But you still do, but you found a woman that accepts that.
Well, most of them are put away now in a big box or like in the room that's now, in the room that's now a storage room basically. And so for me, it kind of played like as a cautionary tale of me feeling like, well, I need to like sort of learn from Andy's journey and kind of get my act together. So in a kind of fucked up way, because we were talking about how bad a lot of the advice Andy gets in this movie is, I think there is a kernel of truth to some of it. Like, I think that most men don't know how to talk to women, like Seth Rogen says. I think that is true. I think being more kind of raw, like mysterious, and not being so like trying so hard. I think there's elements of truth within the kind of offensive and like wild advice that they give him.
Even to interrupt you here with your truth, even what Seth Rogen's character was saying about the level of mystery.
Just ask questions.
I think that actually goes hand in hand with women too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that a lot of women tend to overshare, that they like seem also very available, and that can be a turnoff to men as well. So I think that in a lot of regards, having an element of mystery, not just with like your romantic life, but also in your personal life, just with.
But see, I've personally never been good with that. We mentioned right before, I think it's actually probably going to be the cold open, that I tend to go to extremes, Billy Joel style. I go to extremes. So I'm either like not cut off, not conversing, and kind of like, socially closed off. So that's to that extent of introvertedness, or I way overshare and I'm just like open book, and that's both of those are no good. So I think for me, it was a little bit of an education in a weird way. It's a kind of seeing this character coming from that perspective, trying to enter this world much later than I was at that point. But, there was just some parallels that I was seeing in my own personal life with that, with me trying to get out there. And so it wasn't until right around the time before this movie came out. There was, to get even more personal for a minute, and then we'll start talking about the movie. Because, like I said, this movie is very personal to me in a lot of ways. And I recognize that, there are parts of it that are very offensive, that have not aged well, that I do not endorse. Please don't tackle drunk bitches or women. I wouldn't even call them bitches, because I was just quoting the movie there. There's a lot of things in this movie that I don't approve of. But it came out at a point, and the same thing can be said of How I Met Your Mother, which is the whole thing is about, like, I don't want to be single. I'm not good at it, was Ted Mosby's thing in the pilot. That, I was at that point a year before. My aunt had talked to my mom and said, is Robbie happy? Because he was cut off. Yes, my family calls me Robbie. And my mom asked me, and I was like, I guess I'm not happy. And so I, had the acne. I was overweight. Now I'm more overweight, but that's because of the quarantine and the pandemic stress in Trump's America and all that. And then, I started working out and started going out there, went on dating sites and blah, blah, blah. That's how you and I eventually met on eHarmony. And so it wasn't until we got together and we started dating that I even lost my virginity, like he does in this movie. So, with that part at the end where they're sort of getting close to, or they were about to, or whatever, I kind of made an inside joke to you about, like, our first time. And that's sort of, again, the parallel between it. So it's a movie that resonates with me in a lot of ways because it is about someone later getting into the dating scene later than they're supposed to. And the other thing I love about it too is that it touches on the fact, and I mentioned this to you yesterday because we had just watched the movie for this episode, so it was in my head, that, so much of dating is so focused on sex that and in a way, it really, like they say in the movie, it complicates things. Like the relationship between Trish and Andy is only able to grow once he doesn't have to worry about the sex part of it. Then they're able to get to know each other. Similarly, as I pointed out when we were watching it, you and I, we met on eHarmony, we met up in person, and then you went to China, and then, read Kai's book, Becoming Version 2.0 on Amazon for more information on that. But it was during that time that you were gone that we really got to know each other, so that when you came back and we started dating for real, we had progressed past kind of the getting to know you phase to a certain extent. And so I feel like that our relationship and our marriage and, family now wouldn't have happened had that circumstance not fallen into place because of where I was. I mean, you've said that, you had a lot of growing up to do too at that point, but specifically where I was with the sex thing, that it, the point that Andy makes early on is that he tried and it didn't happen. And then it's one of those things that the longer you wait, the bigger a shadow it casts on you. And so you feel like there's something wrong with you because you're walking around out there and you're like, everybody's got somebody. And now I'm like, 27, I guess, when you and I first. And it's like, why does that have to be such a big deal? Like, I understand why it is such a big deal, and it is a big deal, but it supersedes everything else. You know what I mean? And there's a scene in there where they're at his apartment, and Trish is coming over to pick him up, and his friends are like freaking out, like, oh, we gotta get rid of this stuff, and he's like, yeah, but none of this stuff is sexy. Seth Rogen, I think, says, and Andy's like, I'm not trying to be sexy, man, and it's like the whole point is like, yeah, that's a good. Granted, he's a 40-year-old man, and he has an apartment full of toys and a framed Asia poster, and he's all about karaoke and video games. First of all that stuff is cool.
Which, that's the joke.
They're in there hanging out, and they're like, this place is awesome. And as soon as the girl comes out, they're like, oh, fuck, we gotta fix this. All that stuff is cool, but in the right context. In the context of a 40-year-old virgin, she's like, oh, what is this, your roofie, your date drug? Like, he looks like he seems like a weirdo, like a pervert, or like there's something wrong with him. Like a man-child, like what Michael Jackson allegedly might have been.
But he also kind of didn't disclose any of this to her until...
Right. Well, but do you blame him for not feeling open? I mean, I didn't tell you until after the fact.
No, but he didn't disclose anything really with I guess he did with the toys and stuff, because she wanted to just help him sell it.
Oh, I love that scene so much. We'll get there. But
maybe that was her anxiety peeking through, being like...
Right.
oh God, it's been 20 dates, and like now I'm finally in this guy's apartment, and this is what I'm seeing, and like maybe she started kind of overreacting a little bit too, like he overreacted before.
Right. But it's all about context. So, it's so much of the focus is on appearances and not being kind of genuine and true to yourself. And that's what I love about this movie, is that the moments where he is following his heart, where he, they're like, yeah, you need to do this. You need to, you need to like run through these hood rats. Or I think that's what, God, I can't remember. Jay says at one point, everybody has their own like advice, which he says at one point, like, you guys all give me different advice.
Which is funny because ironically, not a single one of them has a committed woman.
Well, or is faithful to him,
right.
Her, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, that's really, they're not the best people to take advice from.
But see, that's the thing. I think that's kind of what the movie is saying. Like, if you look at the movie starts out and they're playing poker and they're all making making fun of him, and it's like a panic thing for him, which I understand had I been in that situation like that. And he, it becomes like a point of mockery early on. And then as the movie progresses, they legitimately are trying to help him. Maybe they're giving him bad advice, but they're trying to help him. But it's when he sheds all of the chip on his shoulder with regards to his virginity, and he's like, oh, you guys don't think I could do shit? And he runs over there and he asks her out. And it's like when he's being himself with them, when the sex is taken off the table and he's able to more be himself. Yes, he's himself. Being himself is dorky. He does magic and he carries like the big ear in his pocket or whatever. But he's genuine and he's got a fun personality, and he's like got and I think it's when he follows his heart that relationship starts to happen. And I pointed out to you, like in a weird way, this is kind of like a cinematic version of our relationship. One, because I was a virgin when we got together. Two, because I was later bloomer than I should have been. And three, famous Ashley Grant, who's been on this show, has compared my physical looks to Steve Carell. I don't know, it might be the hooded eyes, I think. And I think you kind of have like a Catherine Keener look going on. So it feels like it's a weird parallel between our real life relationship and the movie. So, any other thoughts on my side of it? I guess I just wanted that's context. I just said it was a huge thing. So,
well, good news, guys, for everybody that's listening. Rob just opened his heart up here, and I knew about all this, so it wasn't.
Before this, obviously.
Did you see?
Well, that was an interesting conversation that we had several years ago.
It was, and I'm, and Rob was pretty open about that with me in like when we really. Not before, but we were more like. I tried to downplay it. Yeah.
Because you were like, dude, what the fuck? Yeah. And I was like, it's been a while.
Yeah, and but I'm glad that you told me as early on as you did.
Right.
And it's also when you were talking about how for him to, like, when he starts being more himself, when sex doesn't complicate things. It's also, the virginity didn't just cast a shadow on, his sex life. It also casts a shadow on his own securities.
Yeah.
You know? And like, I think that the advice I gave you, 9 years ago when we started dating was that if not to be ashamed, like you like to own your insecurities.
Right.
And like that's one thing that I never really did that well was own my insecurities. And now that I'm older, more mature, more confident in myself, like it's like if somebody, I think my advice was if somebody was to be like, oh, you were a virgin, like, yeah, so and like own it. And
which is what he does later in the movie at the doctor's office, at the health clinic with Marla. Yeah, I kind of remember her character. I was gonna tell her Darcy. I'm like, no, that's MCU, and and he's just like, I'm a virgin, and then everybody laughs at him. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it's like people can't hurt you and judge you if you own your insecurities.
Right.
You own and you have that authenticity about yourself. And I think that is what's really good about what happens at the end of the movie is that he does start to become more confident and own it. And
I get emotional from coming from my perspective, but also the way that the movie handles it. When she freaks out, she runs away, and have that great heat of the moment. Little, like, of course, because it's essentially a romantic comedy. That little, like, mini chase scene, like, every romantic comedy ends with somebody. Yeah, exactly. And he goes through and he hurts himself, and he finally says, I'm a virgin. And she's like, that's it? That's all? And like, oh, that's good. And, like, it's like a sweet moment. I still get emotional when we watch that.
Who knew that Seth Rogen's character would have had the best advice that Steve Carell's character didn't take? When Seth Rogen's character said, "You should just
test her with this shit."
You just tell her.
Yeah, but he said it like in an aggressive way. Like, you should test her with this shit. See how she reacts. I'm like, okay, I mean, just be honest. Don't set up all these hoops for the woman to jump through. Jesus. So I think let's kind of run through the actual movie. So what I did love that in the beginning, like I said, it's you were saying it's his insecurity, but I don't know if it's necessarily the fact that he's never had sex. It's just indicative of the fact that he has, like she says later on towards the end of the movie, never really grown up. You know, he hasn't really put himself out there to have any kind of really relationships, period, minus watching Survivor with his neighbors, basically. It sounds like that's his only social life. Even the older black couple there are like, oh man, he needs to get laid, you know?
Yeah.
They're like, this guy needs a life. It's just sad. He's a good person, and he's just closed off because he feels defective or something wrong with him. And so I like that because he's never matured, everything in his apartment is very much living in the past. It's 2005, but all his shit is like $6 Million Man and like, you know, Asia and like, you know, Asia, the band Asia. So it's all like 80s culture, like the things that he would have grown up with in his youth. And he hasn't really let himself get up to speed in multiple different facets of his life. And I thought that was really cool. But I also like that he's not really depressed either. He's like I was before. I was like, shit, I guess I am depressed. I just repressed it or whatever. He wakes up. He keeps himself busy. It's like I have a very full life, and he's like practicing his like tuba or whatever. And granted, a lot of that is to distract himself from the fact that he's lonely. But he fills his time. He's not sitting there crying or like, you know, beating himself up about it. He wakes up, he makes himself a nice breakfast, like, you know what I mean? So I like that it's a very healthy depiction. I know your beer made like a splash. Bloop. It's a very healthy depiction of how someone would create a life without having that kind of connection. Mooj even says later, it's like it's about love, it's about connection. It's not about ass and pussy and butthole pleasures. It's not about butthole pleasures at all, which I love his Carell's sort of deadpan sense of humor.
That's
there.
who he should have taken advice from in that movie,
not
those three guys.
Yeah, I know, it's great. He's kind of overly cautious. He's a little vanilla because he's I think probably afraid to offend people, afraid to like put himself out there. Again, sounds familiar.
Maybe he's also afraid to put himself out there because maybe he's afraid that it's gonna come through that he's a virgin, like it did when he went to the poker night.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and again, sounds familiar. Well, he's also like he has coped with this situation for so long by completely ignore it. Which one of my favorite lines. He's like, oh, you know, I think Paul Rudd asks him, are you? No, he doesn't ask you if you're gay. He's like, whatever. He says, oh, he's like, I love women. I love them so much that I completely stay away from them. One of the best lines in the movie. But you see at the very beginning of the movie, he freezes up. There's like a female customer, and he like asks him a question, and he doesn't know what to say. And then Romany Malco kind of jumps in. Romany Malco, who, by the way, you know, his character's kind of terrible, but he's really funny in this movie. Generally, like his performance is really good. So I kind of miss him that he isn't in that many things. He was in The Love Guru after this, and I think that maybe didn't help him very much. We have the interaction with Seth Rogen early on. He's like, oh, you know, we went to Tijuana to see it. Like, there's a woman fucking a horse. And he's like, and meanwhile, Andy did his whole egg salad sandwich thing. So it's just, I think he's just worried that he doesn't compare, you know, that his life's not, like he says, my life, the problem is that there's nothing interesting about me, is what he says, you know? What is your take on? Do you think that's true, or what do you think is the solution for that?
I think that's kind of a lot of people's insecurity. Maybe is that they don't feel like they're very interesting, and that's why, like even like with the movie American Beauty, when she said that one of the worst things in the world is to be ordinary.
Oh yeah.
And like but this character, she's trying so hard to be unordinary that she's lying about stuff. And with the Seth Rogen character, maybe maybe he's trying really hard not to be ordinary, trying so hard to be interesting that he's not being like his true self. So I think a lot of people struggle with being not feeling like they're interesting or trying to be fun. And even myself, like I don't really feel like I'm an interesting person. Maybe I have interesting stories, but on the day to day, I don't think I'm interesting. Well, especially lately, because we don't go anywhere.
Lately there's nothing to do.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't feel like I'm very fun. I don't even do magic, like his character. So I think a lot of people experience that. I mean, I didn't do an official survey, but I do think there's some truth to that.
Crooked Table Street Team needs to get on that, I guess.
Just so you guys know who are listening, we are drinking Keel and Curly Elderberry
Agrarian Cider.
Yeah. I feel like I've
Fancy.
had this one before.
Maybe we tried it when we were there at one point.
Or maybe with Brass Tap or something.
Oh, I
had
know.
it.
Brass Tap's cool.
Yeah.
I miss that place.
So.
But yeah, I think it's all about perspective. If you look at it from that perspective, he's not going to like woman having sex show and woman having sex with a horse, but that sounds awful to me. The egg salad sandwich actually sounds more interesting. But yeah, and I think it's gotten so much worse in the age of social media. This is when MySpace was still a thing. Facebook hadn't really blown up just yet in 2005, and everybody is trying to make the look how great my life is. Look at all this perfect #blessed or whatever kind of thing. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, he does magic, he does karaoke, he's knows a lot about a lot of things. He has a collection of toys that apparently got him, like, as Jay reveals towards the end of the movie, like at the wedding, spoilers, $500,000 worth of toys. He's like, can you believe that shit? He's saying, and he's like, we need to get some fucking toys. So, I mean, look at it however you want it. It depends. The bottom line is that the right person will find him interesting, is the whole point. Exactly. And that he feels like he has to reach some standard. And the fact that he lives in a society where so much emphasis is placed on looks, so much emphasis is placed on confidence, so much emphasis is placed on sexual prowess.
City too. They're in LA, right?
Yeah, I think so. So much emphasis is placed on sexual prowess and things like that. Like, that's why he walks by. As soon as he's like turned on to the fact that, oh, I'm a virgin, I guess I should pay attention to that again. He starts walking the streets and notice every woman that has breasts, and he's like, doesn't know where to look. And the billboard on the bus, and he's just like, running away. The dogs having sex in the park. The billboard that got bigger. Yeah,
on the bus.
Yeah, exactly. The dogs having sex in the now it's like everywhere, and he can't escape it, and it's like he's being overwhelmed by it. Again, I understand. So, I think I want to talk about the cast of this movie because we mentioned Steve Carell, who's excellent in this film, and I think makes the character similar to how Andy Samberg does with Connor for Real and Popstar. Like, he plays a character that could easily be a caricature, but plays him so, as you meant, this is your word I'm going to steal now for the rest of the episode, so earnestly that you're on his side. You're even because Connor and Popstar should be a terrible person. We should be like, fuck this guy. But we're on his side because we understand where he's coming from, and we understand where Andy's coming from, and what a stressful ordeal this whole situation has been for him. And so we're rooting for him to get through it instead of being like, look at this guy, he's never had sex, bag of sand, really, And I think that's a huge reason that this movie works, and it doesn't work if you don't have the right actor in that role.
Yeah, that's true. If you notice, his hair also got a little bit more
coiffed. That's your word. You're all about that word tonight.
Coiffed as the movie went on because he was getting more confident.
He started dressing a little better too.
Feeling himself more. So even we could see that his appearance was changing.
Reflected his character journey. That's a good detail. So I want to talk about the rest of the ensemble though too. Catherine Keener, again, this whole movie falls apart if you don't have a performance or an actor in that role that you can see that these two people fitting together. This story was a huge influence on a novella of mine that I have written kind of multiple drafts of, but never really done anything with. But it has a similar sort of counterbalance of him being so emotionally closed, not emotionally closed up, but so socially closed off and so introverted, and her being complete opposite. Like I told you, I pointed this out to you at the end of the movie. when they're standing in the street and they're like, the guy like honking his horn, like, get the fuck out of the road. And he's like, fuck you, come on. And then Andy is like, sorry, no, like, you know, the fact that he is completely inexperienced. She is not only, you know, so experienced to the point that she was married. She has 3 kids, one of whom has a kid. She's a hot grandma. And her demeanor is way more in your face, way more like very confident, very assertive, very strong. And he has that in him, but he doesn't show it because he's scared. Again, that sounds like us. There's a lot of that kind of thing that I'm saying I see here. So Catherine Keener is great in this movie, and I kind of have a little bit of a crush of her character in this movie too. I love that she has an eBay store, which is something that was, I think, just starting to exist around this time and has since disappeared completely because everybody's like, fuck, I could just go on eBay myself. Why do I need you to do it? It's so easy now.
Yeah, that was really weird.
That was like very, very, that's one of the things that dates this movie the most, besides the misogyny and all that dates this movie the most. So people watching this like now, as young people watching this, be like, what, an eBay store? You go into a place, you hand your...
Well, he even asked about it, and even Andy asked, like, why do they have an eBay?
Jonah Hill's like, why, I just want to take these shoes home. Why do I not give you the money and I can take them home? And she doesn't understand.
Yeah, well, even Andy's like, why do you have an eBay store? Why did they just sell it on eBay? So I feel like it was already dating itself.
Answer? Yeah. I love that. I love it. So the cast of the movie, Jane Lynch is amazing in this. I have her written down because she shows up very early on. So she's got maybe she's got maybe like 2 really choice scenes, both of which she's hitting on Andy. The one where she's like, basically propositioning him and saying about how the gardener that like she had an affair with when she was younger, and she like sings something in Spanish, and then later on, she says, I'm very discreet, but I will haunt your dreams. Like this was a pre-Glee Jane Lynch, so I wasn't familiar with her very much. I hadn't seen the Christopher Guest movies at that point, so she's amazing in this. Paul Rudd, the trifecta really of Paul Rudd, Romany Mako, and Seth Rogen. Great, amazing ensemble cast. Elizabeth Banks as Beth.
Who was she in before this?
Spider-Man, the Spider-Man movies. Wet Hot American Summer, which we've covered on this podcast.
Right, with Paul Rudd.
With Paul Rudd also. David Rosen and I talked about that movie. That's really funny. I should show you that. I don't know if you'd like it because it's a weird sense of humor. And I'm forgetting the other guys' names that work in the store. But there's also, Leslie Mann.
Yeah.
Judd Apatow's wife. First movie I really took notice of. First movie that really made her career as like a name.
Because I remember her from The Cable Guy, but she was not.
She was also in George of the Jungle, which she was in that. I know you didn't.
In Cable Guy, she wasn't really like. She didn't have
really
that
pop in there.
Yeah.
It's a Jim Carrey movie. It's hard to pop in a Jim Carrey movie unless you're Jim Carrey or Cameron Diaz in The Mask. So I love that. The whole Michael McDonald thing with Paul Rudd is great. The one thing in this film that I do think does also, I mentioned earlier about how it does go a little long. You can feel the Apatow improv situation. Like he lets his actors improv a lot. And so there are way more scenes than there should be of people just, I know you're gay because you like Coldplay, which is, again, but it's kind of homophobic. That has not aged very well either. But a lot of the improv things I feel like are funny, but they go on so long that you can go on the DVD and watch like 15, 20 minutes more of those things, the alternate versions that they use. And I get from a certain perspective, it's like, well, you just shoot a bunch and then you use the ones that are funniest. That's great. But it also, those scenes then have nothing to do with anything. You're not propelling the plot forward. You're just like stopping so you can have a conversation that's disconnected from what's going on. And I think that makes the movie kind of slow to a crawl intermittently for a couple minutes at a time. What do you agree with that?
I agree, yeah.
So I think the movie
did not have to be over 2 hours. Honestly.
No, this should have been like 150. I think it would have been nice, tight there. So everybody thinks Andy is creepy, and Carell, like I said, he plays it straight. I have a bunch of notes of which I'm kind of going through quickly.
What about when you were talking about the 3 guys? And how
that's a note I just marked here. Yeah.
And that they were like really like the
different perspectives.
Yeah,
yes.
The trifecta of different perspectives. Like so Jay is he's like the misogynist, he's sexist, he's disgusting. Like I had a hard time listening to any of his advice because it was just horrible. And then you have Paul Rudd's character. What's his name in the movie?
I'm blank. I was just about to look it up. I forgot his name.
It's not Paul.
No, it's not. It's is it Mike in Clueless? What's his name in Clueless?
Oh my gosh. Oh,
He's
Josh.
He's David.
David. Okay.
David, yeah.
Yeah, and so
And Cal is Seth Rogen.
yeah, so David is like the romantic who is like obsessed with his ex-girlfriend, who we find out later on in the movie he only dated her for 4 months.
Well, no. Even better. Not only that, he only dated her for 4 months, and he's been like obsessed with her, tracking her down, and she's like Mindy Kaling, who shows up in her first movie role because she was tight with Apatow from something else that they worked on or whatever. And she's like, I changed my email, I moved, and then Seth Rogen's like, well, I'm sorry, I did not know that.
And Seth Rogen's character, Cal, so he's more...
He's like casual single guy.
He's
like
like the middle of the road. Like,
yeah.
He's, he's not misogynist, but he's not... And he's like both...
Right.
Both,
I sort of compared it to How I Met Your Mother again.
Triangle.
I sort of compared it to How I Met Your Mother. That Seth Rogen is like...
Which premiered the same year.
Yeah, Seth Rogen is like the Ted. Like, he's like, dating, and if something happens to be a relationship, great, but otherwise he's just being casual, kind of casual single guy. Paul Rudd is like the romantic guy who's like heartbroken and like really hung up on a certain relationship, which more like in line with Marshall. And Jay is just, I'm going to do whatever I can, as much as I can with whoever I can. Yeah, exactly. And
Even
so
though the difference is he's with somebody.
Right. Ironic. Yeah, exactly.
So he is Marshall for the commitment part, but he is Barney for the cheating and like gross part.
Oh, I respect women so much that I completely stay away from them. That's what it was. So yeah, they have the whole poker thing, and then they're making fun of him, but then it quickly turns itself around, and I love that the movie captures the immediate kind of panic that would happen when his worst nightmare, which is everybody finding out that he's a virgin, kind of
that is
takes
a pretty
place.
bad nightmare.
It is. It's.
It
never happened to me. Yeah, it did. I was worried it was going to happen. The closest I came was hanging out with some friends at one of their houses one time, and it was like the end of the night, and there was like me and a couple other friends, and then that came up, and I did sort of confirm, I guess, because, I was asked, and then I kind of dodged it, and that was basically confirmation. Kind of like in this movie, where he's like, no bag of sand or anything like that. That was after this movie, I think, too, when that conversation happened. And then, David has a heart-to-heart with him. I talked about his little running through the city, and it's like sex is everywhere kind of deal. Tackle drunk bitches, we talked about those. That's terrible. Leslie Mann, who gives, essentially, like I said, a career-making role. Performance in this. One of the best lines, and I'm not talking about the French toast, although that was quoted a lot after this movie. What's some fucking French toast?
I even remember it.
Yeah.
I've only seen the movie 3 times.
This is two of them with me, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Wow. The part where they get in the car accident and she says, that fucker came out of nowhere. And I told you when I was preparing for this episode, I watched the trailer, and she shows up at the speed dating thing in the trailer. So I'm thinking that in an earlier version, she was actually included in that speed dating montage, and didn't remember Andy because she tells him again, "You have kind eyes," which she tells him in the car. So which would have been a fun callback to the point that she was blackout drunk basically and didn't even remember that she'd ever met him before. And that's disturbing on a whole nother level. But there are ladies like that.
No, that's also, I think, I'd like to think she's also an exaggeration because she had the breathalyzer in her car.
Well, she's also like running down, like scraping like 10 cars as the car is.
And this is not new for her.
I'm so sleepy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
The court made me. They had a court. She said she had the court made me get the breathalyzer because she's got however many DUIs, I guess, at this point.
That scene was very scary.
Right. Well, that's what he's thinking too. Yes, you're pretty. Great.
But just so you guys, as a PSA for everybody, please
don't drive.
First, don't drink and drive, and also do not get in a car with a person who's drunk.
And conversely, as the male perspective here, don't air quotes tackle drunk bitches. That's terrible. That's an awful thing. We did our Batman Forever episode, and I alluded to when I was listening to Batman 89, and she's like, "Oh, I'm like a little drunk," and he's like, "Yeah, okay, we'll have sex anyway." That kind of thing. It's very,
But a lot has changed.
A lot has changed. I don't blame Batman. I blame this guy. I don't blame Batman so much. As much.
I don't even think date rape was a thing even until the 60s, maybe 70s.
That's fucked up.
It's
just kind of assumed consent, basically.
Yeah,
We're
like,
here, so clearly you were asking for it kind of thing, which is the whole
So a lot
problem.
has changed in even 15 years with that, and I'm so glad. But there's been like a lot of progress,
Right.
and like, I mean, it's gross and unbelievably wrong, and definitely legal. But you can't fault the movie because it was the time,
Right.
even if it was 15
Well, and
years ago.
in this movie, Jay, like as we said, Jay is called out by everybody else about like, ew, gross, dude. Like, why is it? And then he has this little breakdown later, like, I'm insecure, you can't tell. That thing, which I love, is great. It's a great performance. Terrible character.
Do you think so?
Terrible person.
So to go on that, so do you think that Jay was actually ultimately more insecure than Andy was?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I love that twist. He's like, you got the right idea. You got to leave the sex out of it. I understand where you're coming from and that kind of thing. I think Romany Malco is great in this movie. I think his character is the most problematic part of it. But I think his performance is great. And I think the character is entertaining, albeit upsetting in a different way. Then you have the whole scene with the pussy on a pedestal. You're putting the pussy on a pedestal. Turn it into the Greek goddess Pussalaya or whatever. And I think that's a terribly crass way of putting it. But again, I think there is truth to that. Like Andy has blown this whole situation up in his head so much that it seems like some unattainable feat, like he said, like the guys tell him in that movie. So I think there's some truth to that again, and even though it's very inappropriately expressed, but it's an R-rated comedy, so it's like, what do you expect? And then we meet Catherine Keener, who I literally drew a heart by her name because I love her character in this so much.
I thought you were going to say you drew a stick figure of her.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you know it's her? And I think you can see immediately that they have kind of a connection, like in the store. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's chemistry.
And she gives him her number. He gets a number right off the bat, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I think that's to the point that he let his guard down for 2 seconds, and she connected with real Andy, not, do you want me to be fucking retarded? Like that Andy, you know what I mean? Which again, using that word in that sentence that I just said, not aged well either. The guys go on some shenanigans. They smoke they make an apple into a bong. They pee on a restaurant wall. Again, whatever. Don't endorse.
I'm so
There's
glad.
a lot of stuff.
I'm so glad I'm not out there.
There's a lot. Oh God, I know. There's a lot of stuff I don't.
Especially now with like Tinder and like basically app dating.
Oh God, I know. We're lucky. We were able to get. We're online dating.
Hashtag
Obviously,
blessed.
online dating actually worked for us, and we beat out app dating, where it's like swipe left, swipe right. Can you imagine if it was that? Again, this is not to go on a tangent because we're already running over, but it's not running over yet, but we're behind schedule. It's that only like perpetuates the whole superficiality of dating, where you're like, swipe left. Like, what the hell? You don't know who this person is. Maybe this person that has a nice photo is a rapist, and maybe this person who looks a little awkward in his photo is like the man of your dreams. You know what I mean? Or vice versa.
I feel like
with
that
females.
happened too with like eHarmony and Match.com. That there was like still some
Yeah, but it was a little more of a process involved.
Yeah,
It just it seems like so. I don't know. It's so. I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. Obviously, that's why I'm not single. Plus, I love you, so. I want to thanks. I want to talk about the wax scene. We're gonna need more wax. That whole situation. One of the most famous scenes in the movie where he really got his chest waxed, and a lot of that wasn't scripted. A lot of the things he was like, "Oh, come on,
I haven't been waxed."
No, that seems awful. Just here, and I know it's a movie, but shave it down and then wax like the little bits of hair that are left. Don't just, you know what I mean? Like you can trim it. You can take a razor and just trim it down. Not that you're pulling out huge hairs from the roots. That's very upsetting. Anyway, I love that scene. Very funny. Good stuff. Paul Rudd literally like cracking up in the scene. Probably again not part of the script. Just literal like reactions.
Improv, right?
I think so. I think they were just like it was just a setup, and they literally waxed Steve Carell's chest for that scene. At least to the points that we saw. And so the guys' reactions are all genuine, I would assume. We meet Elizabeth Banks, which this time I wrote a smiley face with heart eyes because I like Elizabeth Banks in this movie. Not her character, but I like Elizabeth. She's very attractive in this movie, and she's very funny. And you think we've seen a lot of her career really blossom. This is what I was telling you when we were watching it. So many careers have blown up because of this movie. Steve Carell, Seth Rogen, Paul Rudd. This was like his beginning of the resurgence with him. Anchorman in this.
I'm so happy to see Paul Rudd again.
I know.
I'm clueless.
I said Jane Lynch already. Elizabeth Banks. After this movie, she's directed movies. She's gonna be the new Miss Frizzle in Magic School Bus movie that just got announced. So it's like
she's not quirky enough to be Miss Frizzle.
I don't think so either. I think she can be though. We'll see. She was Rita Repulsa in Power Rangers. I wouldn't expect that either. That was kind of a weird casting. Not that just ask questions, all that stuff. So this is where we're still in like advice mode basically at this point of the movie. So I mentioned to you. Well, we got to talk about his. No, Andy, I don't want your big box of pornography. We got to talk about that first. But the movie is pretty evenly divided into the first half is the guys trying to get him out there, and the second half is him and Trish and their 20 dates thing and all that. What did you think about the fact that not only this also feels kind of a little bit far-fetched for me to make it an exaggerated movie comedy. The fact that not only has he never had sex, but he doesn't really masturbate. He says not that. He's like, I don't do that much. It doesn't sound like he does that at all. Because when he tries, it's very uncomfortable for him. Like it's like me. I don't know if it's because David put so much pressure on him with the big box and the Boner Jams 03, or what was the situation there? How do you feel? Do you think that's kind of not a plot hole, but like where the movie goes a little bit too far? Like, okay, he doesn't even know how to masturbate. Like, how does he exist? Like, I guess just suppressing things.
I guess that's what I'm saying, that he's very sexually repressed.
Right.
I mean, I'm not a man, so I don't, but
no, but from the perspective of the movie,
I think he's sexually repressed. I'm sure that's.
And stereotypically, men are much more frequenters of that. Yeah. I say stereotypically because everybody's different, but
yeah, but I think maybe, writing the screenplay, they wanted to just get the
focus it down. Yeah.
But in reality, no, I don't think that if you're
40, you're probably 40,
like, I don't.
You have your own Boner Jams mixtapes.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. Yeah.
I mean, coming from my perspective, I was like, wait a minute, no, I don't. You're going a bridge too far, movie. I don't know if I can go that far with you. That seems a little unrealistic. The fact that they play Lionel Richie's "Hello" and it's sort of like building to a romantic thing, like the candles are lit, the pictures are turned. That was all hilarious. Again, for me, who was single until you. Pretty much. Stormy Daniels making a cameo there. The only thing I knew about her until obviously the whole Trump situation.
So you knew her name when Trump situation happened?
Yeah, because I think I had seen this movie, so I used to watch this movie a lot, and I think I saw her name in the credits.
Like, I don't know.
I'm more familiar with that world than you are, obviously. Well, not obviously, but. So I think I did see her name in the credits at one point. I was like, oh, who's that lady? Stormy Daniels. Okay. And so when her name came up from this thing, I was like, oh, I know her. She's in that 40-Year-Old Virgin. She's in that, like...
And
that's like,
to get a little bit off topic, wasn't that around the time that the whole shenanigans even happened?
I don't know. I don't remember exactly when that was supposed to have happened. Maybe it was after this movie. Maybe Trump saw this movie and he's like, I like her. I need to get her number.
Anyway.
I'll grab her places. And so he gets the advice, the speed dating thing. I wrote oof next to the disabled, the differently abled comment where he's like, do you want me to be fucking? That thing. Because that, again, didn't like that. I have
that wasn't
issues
okay
with that.
Even then.
Not really.
That's not progress. That was just not okay then.
It was more acceptable then. And it's also, he's not the one that says it. He's repeating someone else's say. The whole thing is that you can't hold that against Andy either in that case. Because someone says, the lady is like, are you fucking retarded? And then he's like, do you want me to be fucking? Because he's doing the whole thing that worked with Beth in the bookstore. So it's not like he's the one calling it, using that word of his own volition. It's just he's repeating that was his tactic. But yes, I mean, I remember 3 years later when Tropic Thunder came out, it got a lot of flack for, you never go full retard, that whole thing. At which
that was 2009, wasn't
that
it?
was 2008. Huh. So it was on the cusp. I think this was right around the time where people were like, I don't know if we should say that anymore. So it kind of snuck in there at the last minute. But again, it's more makes that lady look terrible than it makes Andy look terrible. So Gina, again, sort of a stereotypical like butch lesbian kind of thing. There's a lot of stereotypes in this movie. But again, it's a comedy, so it's hard not to do that. And I don't like it. I will admit though, I previously gave this movie a 5 out of 5. After watching it and all these different things, I'm like, shit, do I need to drop this to like a 4.5? Just because like some of these things really do rub me the wrong way. Not Andy's story, but like a lot of the stuff surrounding it. I wrote about that. The movie calls out how Jay is so gross. He's got the whole thing with the speed dating card, and then Andy has to kind of cover for him, which is a funny scene because Andy is trying to be so un-Andy like. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the Ho for show?
Oh God, he just
He took
it like way too far there, like being like, oh, tell your bitch to step off or something like that.
Yeah, bitch is running wild.
Yeah, no, that was really like, and even for Jay to be like, hey man.
I mean, I think he was also in character. I think he was like, good, you're doing a good job, Andy. Keep it up.
I don't know.
You read it that he was like, okay, now you're pushing it too.
Yeah, I did, because even if, like, suppose that was you, like on the
no, I know
if you were Jay in this situation and you were.
Well, I mean, he doesn't respect his girlfriend enough to not like cheat on her constantly. So.
But maybe he doesn't want her to be disrespected in front of her face.
I guess. I hope so.
He's still going to be protective of her.
That whole relationship is very troubling.
Yes.
And then they stay together because she gets pregnant, and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to go well for you guys, but good luck with that. The thing with Andy and the...
You should have a sequel. With
yeah,
Jay
like a This Is 40 style sequel, focusing on that spin-off relationship. They set Andy up with the hooker who ends up being a transvestite. Again, and she had an Adam's apple as big as her balls. A lot of that comes off sort of transphobic in a way. It's kind of not as bad as some other things. Matt Damon saying that he was like a Streisand. David says there's a lot of these homophobic, but again, I don't 100% hold it against the movie. I mean, I do hold it against the movie, but it's also until recently when woke culture was much more of a thing. And I'm 100%, I want to make it clear to listeners, I'm 100% supportive of Black Lives Matter and, GLAAD and the LGBTQ community, all that good stuff. And hashtag Me Too, Women's March. I was just about to say, I'm like, who else is there? 100% support of all that progress. I love all that. But at the same time, this was 2005, 1. 2, it's an R-rated comedy, so they're purposely trying to play into stereotypes and push the envelope and be kind of in your face and ballsy. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's writers, and Apatow's included in this, take the lazy way out and be like, well, we could just fall on homophobia jokes and things like that. That's just easy shortcuts for comedic, moments and things. And the other thing being, this is also, at this time especially, and much earlier, that's how guys were. That's how guys are, generally, sometimes. Like, oh, what are you, what are you, gay? Like that kind of thing. That was very common.
Do you think that's still something that guys say?
Not as much.
Because now...
It depends on the people. I mean, look at the people that are... we watched a video recently about people freaking out about, the pandemic or whatever, like not with the masks and things like that. I'm like, there's still a lot of out there people. So it depends on the person, I think. But I think now it's way more... It's... The pendulum has swung the other way, where... Back in the day, if you said something in public or on video or on the internet or whatever, being like homophobic or whatever, you might not make much reaction from it. Or people will be like, yeah, right? What's up with those? And they use like the derogatory F word for gay people and things like that, which I won't say that. But I think now if you do that, people are like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Stop being an asshole, a hater, or whatever. You're like, racist or homophobic. Like people, they call you out on your shit now. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, people were like, whatever, that's fine. Or they join in.
Right.
Maybe you get a couple people who would be like, that's not right. You shouldn't be talking like that. But now it's like the hammer comes down and motherfuckers are canceled all the time. So in a way, that's good because it forces people to try and be better. So I think that's...
To be more accepting, not just tolerant or indifferent.
Right, exactly. And, we talked recently, obviously, this week, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening with now white actors are not being cast on like The Simpsons and Family Guy and other cartoon shows voicing black characters. The Dixie Chicks are dropping the Dixie from their name, I guess. Things like that. And some of it might be going, it's like the cartoon character thing. I understand. I think that makes sense to a certain degree. But it's also like, I think some of it might be kind of overstepping in the other direction. But shit was going wrong for so many different kinds of people for so long that I'm fine with a little bit of collateral damage.
Are we trying to divorce the South right now?
I mean,
isn't Florida included in that?
I'm in Florida. I kind of want to divorce the South too. I mentioned the moment of defiance that when he just marks her across the street and asks her out. Like, she's like, oh, how are you doing? He's like, oh, he's good. Like, oh, you want to go out? And then she's like surprised and reacts very positively. I love that moment. The Rudd is celibate, where Paul Rudd is celibate, and he has the whole, oh, I know you're gay. This is one of like 3 conversations, and I'm like, oh, I'm a gay guy now. And they're otherizing gay people, so that's not great.
It would have been nice. I think it would have been good of them if they actually had a gay character, like a gay friend, because. Maybe that
I don't know if Judd Apatow would have
be in the remake.
I don't know if don't remake this. I don't know if Judd Apatow would have known how to write for that character very well. At least not at this time. Well, he did have a co-writer. Steve Carell actually co-wrote this movie with him, which is weird because I didn't even realize that. I always assumed this was just written and directed by Judd Apatow, like most of his movies are. But I guess no, not so much. The scene with Trish and Andy and with the condoms, and he's just like the Aquaman hands with the condoms and
like,
stuff.
how long was she in the bathroom?
Yeah, I know, that's kind of ridiculous.
And her daughter walks in, and she's like, "Oh my god,
how many times did you guys do it?" And her boyfriend is like, "Dude, teach me." There's so many quotable lines in this movie. It's very it's very rich with some like fun little character beats and memorable lines. So the Viagra line, that's felt random to me. I still think that the Viagra scene, where he's calling the number and he's like, oh, we had a reaction, because he didn't take the drug. Weird. I was like, because I guess he was so turned on with Trish that he was like still hard like hours later, I guess. But I don't, again, he doesn't know how to masturbate. So I guess they were relating back to that. Jane fucking Lynch, I wrote down because she's so funny in the scenes with him. I did write down that his style changed. I did mention that also when we were watching it. How diverse the movie is. You pointed that out to me, so I wrote this down. I love the fact. What else do you
want to say about that?
No, that they have black people and they have Indian people and a lot of white people. I don't know what it wasn't as not as diverse as I guess we made it sound, but it tries more.
Well, Mindy Kaling,
and having a sort of. An Indian woman and a white man in a relationship and not making a big deal about it, that's a big deal. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, that's... And was Jane Lynch openly gay?
I don't know if she was at this time. Probably. I would think so.
She's not diverse. Like,
I don't remember...
Like, color for skin-wise, but diverse in her sexuality.
Right. Not in the movie, but yes. I don't know how often she's even really had a chance to play gay characters, which is... got to be frustrating for her, I would imagine.
Maybe she doesn't want to.
Yeah, but you would probably want to at some point be like play something that feels like you're embodying a part of yourself in that. I don't know. I'm not an actor. I would just imagine that if I was a certain person and my sexuality was this or my race was this and whatever, you want to have the opportunity to play all kinds of things, some of which that will speak to you in different ways than others. I don't know. I said about how their relationship grows because of the lack of sexual possibility. I love that he's dating someone his own age. That he doesn't end up with Beth. So he's 40 and he ends up with someone that's actually a little bit older than he is. I think Steve Carell was like 43 when they made this movie. And I think Catherine Keener was like maybe 45, 46.
I read a bit of trivia that said that's actually was Steve Carell really wanted that. Like it was very important to the script that he was with somebody his own age.
He was
like
43.
It was like more believable that way.
Ooh, he had just turned 43. His birthday's August 16th. So he literally just turned 43 like 3 days before the movie came out.
It's always fun when a movie premieres and it's your birthday.
It's my birthday. It was your birthday recently.
It was.
And it's my birthday soon. And they have complete opposite amount of experience. Kevin Hart. This and Scary Movie 3 were my first exposure to Kevin Hart. Really? Scary Movie 3.
What did he do in Scary Movie?
He's like Anthony Anderson's friend, Anthony Anderson, who's got a crush on, again, there's a lot of homophobic jokes in that movie too, but he's got a crush on Simon Rex's character, the rapper.
Oh, yeah.
And Kevin Hart's like, yeah, like that little guy next to him, like this hype man or whatever. And then he's really funny in this movie too, in his like kind of verbal smackdown.
But isn't that because he's a comedian?
Yeah, but I hadn't seen him before. And he comes out, he's in one scene in this movie. He comes in and he's basically the catalyst for Jay to really get wound up so that he has that breakdown with Andy in the in the back room or whatever. But like about, you know, cheating on, she broke up with me. I'm like, good, fucking asshole. So, I wrote that Paula, the Jane Lynch character, only works in this movie because she's a woman. If it was the other way around, that should be creepy as fuck. But because she's a woman, it works.
Hashtag Me Too.
It's kind of hashtag Me Too in a way here,
too,
but it's a woman, so we laugh at it instead. So I guess I'll allow it, considering all the other things that this movie... And this movie's not even that old.
Bosses. I mean, we didn't really like that movie that much, but...
No, I didn't really like that movie much either.
Bosses...
There's moments in there.
That's...
She's like that too.
Yeah,
like,
she's a
very,
predator.
Very more
to that.
Much more aggressively than this.
Yeah.
Like, she's like trying to pull his pants down in that movie.
And she's like hot and everything, and he's just like, make me.
Well, not that makes a difference.
No, it doesn't. But I'm just saying that, like, it's. Well, that's what the other guy said. But like that one really
because then you
get
into the whole fucked up part of statutory rape, where it's like the young boy that's seduced by his teacher. And then the guy's like, yeah, you didn't. I'm like, that's still fucked up. He's still a child, and she's like 28 and he's like 15. That's not right. It doesn't matter. Yeah, she's hot or whatever. It's like, but it's like the patriarchy situation, and it's just like they decide that's okay or okayer, more okay. Then when it's the other way around, then that's creepy. I don't know. There's a lot of gender. I'm trying to think of the word, and I'm blanking here. Gender double standards, I guess. But that's not news to anybody listening, of course. I like when Andy is the manager, and then Marla wants to wait for sex. So we talked about that situation. Because we have a daughter who's 3 years old, and she's 16. It's 15? 16. And wants to get birth control, and what the best way to handle that is. I forget, what did you tell me when I suggested, like, what should he do in this situation? Like, if this was our daughter, and she was 16 and wants to have sex with her boyfriend, would we be like, yeah, let me help you get condoms or whatever, birth control of some kind?
Yeah, I think I said that I'd want to talk to her about it, and, you know, if she really feels like she, like, you know, wants to, like, I'd rather her do those things, talk to us about those things, than not talk to us about those things, or to react poorly, and then, you know, she'd go behind her back.
Right. Yeah, so. I agree. I think that this was the first...
This is going to happen regardless.
Right, exactly. This is the first really big test for Andy to, like, sort of man up in that relationship and kind of prove that he could last in like a family dynamic with them. And then before you know it, we get to the 20th date thing. Is that where she has the... when do they have the conversation about... She's like, I could kind of see this going someplace. Isn't it like around the 20th date?
Wasn't the 20th date they had a fight?
Yeah, but when do they have the conversation? Is it right before? Is it before they decide to wait? Right, that's what it is, right? I think it's when they decide to wait. It's like right when they were like on their second date or whatever. They feel the connection already. So like I can kind of see this going somewhere. And he's like, yeah, me too. And he's like, oh, like it's really sweet. And then they have the 20th date conversation. We're like, oh, it's our 20th date. And he's like, oh, are you sure? Because and he starts, and I love that because then they start making out and he panics and he regresses and he gets in that full-on fight or flight response mode where it's like you're trying to make me sell my stuff, you're trying to change me, and she's like, I'm not trying to change you, I'm trying to help you grow up, Andy. Like I love that dynamic because you can, like, coming from my perspective, which I already laid out, I understand where he's coming from.
The other dichotomy with Andy's character and you is that he has his first sexual experience with someone he ended up marrying.
That's true.
Like his first real girlfriend became his wife.
But I did it. I did the virginity thing, 13 years, and then the marriage thing, 31? When were we when we got married? 30. Almost 31.
We were about to be 31.
So I did it. I was ahead of schedule. So in your face, Andy. Just, you know, no offense to anybody that's obviously in an Andy-like situation. I understand. So yeah, that's a good point. I love that. I love the fact that they have that fight and how, like I was just saying, the dynamic that creates. I don't love the fact that he goes out clubbing with them, gets drunk, and nearly has sex with Elizabeth Banks. As hot as she is in that moment, I'm like, this is very upsetting. And then, you know, he's like, ooh, this is really graphic. And the way that he leaves the room, and then the guys are there, of course, and he says, he's like, all I know is that woman scares the shit out of me. and I love that because he's not like those guys. Like, he's purer of heart because of his situation than those guys. Like, he doesn't just go out and sleep around or whatever. It's like it matters more to him.
Well, is he also pure of heart because of the situation, or is he pure of heart?
No, but the situation reveals that, is what I'm saying.
Oh.
Like, Elizabeth Banks is very attractive now, but Elizabeth Banks then was, more attractive in some ways, especially in the situation that she's in that movie. I don't even want to say it because it's so graphic. Like he says in that scene, to different person, as you saw and as you see in the movie, Seth Rogen is like, "Hey, what's up? I'm Cal," and he like gets in the bathtub with her, and that ends up, I guess, starting a relationship because you see them together at Andy's wedding. He's like me. Andy is coming from a different perspective. He's coming at relationships and sex from a very different perspective because his experience is completely different. So like you and I run into that sometimes when we're watching something and we're watching, weirdly, we were watching Fuller House. And Matt, who is a former boyfriend of DJ's in like the first couple seasons or whatever, just is hanging around with the guy, her fiance, and it's like part of the family. And I'm asking him, like, isn't that weird? Because they like dated for a while, and presumably, I mean, it's hard to imagine DJ Tanner having sex because she's so whatever. Presumably had a sexual relationship, and now he's just like, hey, what's up? I'm hanging out here. Even though, yeah, I banged DJ, to be crass about it again. Like, isn't that weird? And you're like, no, because blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I mean, okay. I mean, I have no reference point for this kind of thing, because I don't have any exes, really. I don't have any previous sexual experience, really. And so I feel like it colors my perspective of relationships and in some ways the world. And so I understand why Andy would come to that situation and be like, whoa, I don't know what the hell this is about, but I'm not feeling it in my heart. And that's kind of like his thing is in that moment. And I think that's really sweet, ultimately. This like weird that's like crass sex comedy is ultimately a really sweet movie. And I think that's why I respond to it much more than things like, I guess American Pie has it tries to do that too, or like the Wedding Crasher movie and things like that, where I'm just like, American Pie ends up trying to be like that because some of the people, when they have sex, it's like they get closer to their relationship. But it's also then you have the kid who has sex with his friend's mom, and then the other one who's like basically like, it's a whole situation.
And
it's played for laughs
American Pie
too.
Band Camp was the
trailer on the DVD for the same studio, Universal.
Why did they make that a theme park ride?
So it's like most sex comedies like that don't resonate with me because of that reason. I like the more Austin Powers, Ace Ventura, like silly kind of over the top comedy. That's more my jam. So thoughts on everything I just said, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's the kind of the big reason that this movie didn't really resonate with me is it's more male. It is more male centered and.
Well, the character's journey also, the character's journey doesn't match yours.
Yeah, and I don't like,
too.
I didn't like American Pie. I didn't really care for Wedding Crashers that much. I never even saw Porky's.
Oh, well, that's kind of before our time, too. A little bit. We're like right around, we were toddlers when it came out or whatever.
Like sex comedies either.
Same, yeah.
So, and sex comedies are more directed towards men.
Of course, because we're more perverted.
But then, like Bridesmaids comes out, and that changes the game for women.
We're perceived as more perverted. I want to make sure I come off as sex positive for women, obviously, but we're perceived that way, and that's what studios are like. Well, guys or young boys, they're like hormones; they'll go see anything. I'm like, no, not really. I won't. But okay. So I love that moment where she's like, are you okay? He's like, no, I'm not okay. He's like, I'm a virgin, and he like looks down and like with the helmet. I'm like, aw. I drew like a sad face emoji because it's very emotional. And she's like, you're a virgin? That's all? He's like, yeah. And he's like, he says it in a very illogical way too. He's like, I'm a virgin. I always have been. I'm like, well, yeah, I would imagine that's how that works. It's not like you're like, I was the whole time. I'm like, well, yeah, if you are now, that's all. Yeah. But he says, I used to panic that it never happened, and now I realize that I was waiting for you. And I was like, oh, I think that's really sweet. I love the way the movie ends, and that Though that's the whole point is that. And
it is weird though.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's sweet, but it's also weird that they just decided to get married.
That's what
and then
you beat me.
consummate.
I was about to say that, and you interrupted what I was about to because I was about. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, like, then it
Perfect.
starts to kind of have this like biblical meaning to it in a way. Like he's like, oh, I guess I was just saving myself for marriage now.
Yeah, that's weird. I agree. I think it's just for this to have a neat like movie ending is why romantic comedy tends to end with a flash forward to a wedding or something. Because I wrote that down too. I was like, wait, how long after this that conversation on the road did they get married? Like, did they just like, all right, well, let's get married tomorrow and whatever? Like, or did they then have to wait months after that? Like, even if he proposed to her that next day, there's a lot that goes into planning a wedding. Like, did they just get married? Like, how did that work exactly? And if so, what is the movie trying to say that he felt like he needed to wait? It's like, okay, you sold her. She's cool with it. You go back to her place now and you do it that day. Like after you make up and then you have sex and then you're good. And then you get married. Not that you wait. I mean, I guess, everybody's entitled to their own choices. But traditionally, it doesn't seem like Andy was trying to wait until marriage. No. It seemed like he was trying to wait till the right moment or the right person or whatever.
That was a weird ending to me.
Yeah, I think that is.
The first time I saw it, I'm like, I don't get this.
Why? Well, yeah. I'd see at me being a virgin, I didn't even connect with that. I was just like, yeah, of course, he loves her. They get married.
Yeah, and I mean, they had already been on 20 dates.
So they've been dating for several months, I guess, or a month, or whatever.
And the other thing about that,
a month and a half or something. I don't know.
So he is now like, he goes from not telling anybody anything to now he's divulging to
the priest
colleagues.
Now consummate the thing already.
All the colleagues being like, oh, it's gonna be 20 dates and we're gonna have sex. It's like at that after he met, oh my gosh, what's her name? Trish. It would have been good if he's kind of started to be more tight-lipped on what was going on, because he's now being kind of treated like the
House of Gossip,
the celebrity of the. Well,
they're all, but I don't see it that way. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I think that everybody except for Paula is rooting for him. Like they realize Andy's a good guy and they're trying to help him
but it starts to
find
be like
somebody or whatever.
Like, oh, it's gonna be the 20th date. It's like, he should have just left.
So you'll have sex in 30 days or whatever.
Yeah,
just in that one scene.
Like,
have sex in 30 days.
Yeah, we met and we're hitting off, and then when they.
Yeah, but it's too late. He's invested. Yeah. They're all invested at that point. They're invested like we're invested. They're watching the same movie. So then they have sex very fast, as it, which makes sense. And then he's a trooper after that. One experience, and the second time around, 2 hours later. So, respect, Andy. And then we get the whole Aquarius musical number, which I think is really fun. Your thoughts on, I guess, the marriage thing is a weird sort of leap in logic. The fact that then they wait until marriage at that point, when again, there, like I said, there'd been no ground laid out for that Andy was waiting until he got married for any reason. It was just like the right person or the right time or whatever. So what are your thoughts on Aquarius?
That was really weird. Like, I like that song a lot, but it was just really weird. And I guess it's because, I'm not a man. I don't know that feeling of like orgasm, especially if it's probably happened for the first time. I don't know. I just felt it was out of place.
It's fun.
But that whole ending was out of place.
It's fun though. I like it. It's really the scene on the road is the ending. Everything else after is just like denouement, basically. It's like, all right, here's some more fun stuff on your way out, And I think, it's just the movie trying to communicate kind of the bliss of that afterglow moment where he's like, yeah, I had sex now. I just had sex. It was basically that moment.
That's your second Andy Samberg reference.
On this episode, yeah, it's true. I need to go watch Popstar and, what is it? The Bash Brothers thing on Netflix, which is really funny. So, overall thoughts on 40-Year-Old Virgin now, having seen it for the third time. Still probably one of my favorite comedies. I think there's a lot of, as I mentioned, there's things that have not aged well. But we started this format of the podcast with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which has a lot of things that have not aged well, especially transphobia, things like that. So, what are your thoughts on this movie now, having seen it, especially having been with me and my connection to it, and now we've talked for almost an hour and a half about that whole deal.
I think it's a cute movie, and especially with your relationship to that movie, it has more of an impact and resonates with me more. And Catherine Keener also, she smiles, her eyes get all squinty like mine do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See?
And I'm really proud of you for being open about the virginity, and because I know it's been hard for you to kind of talk about that, and so I'm proud of you for.
Well, it's a personal
being
for a long time it was like the thing I was ashamed of, and then since then it's like you can't just drop it randomly in conversation. I'm like, by the way, did you know this? So even if I wanted to like talk about it, the opportunity didn't really present itself. And this was a movie that I was wanting to cover, and I was like, well, I can't do this movie and not talk about my own personal experience and how it connects. I would be a hypocrite. Would be betraying the premise of this show, bringing on fans and critics alike to talk about their personal connection to a current or classic release. This is my personal connection to this classic, I guess, 15 years old release. So, it's kind of part and parcel of talking about this movie. So, and that's what, once I decided that I wanted to talk about this movie for my birthday thing, I knew I had to have Kai on, because this would have been a weird conversation to have with my mom. Even though I don't even know if she's seen this all the way through. She probably has at some point, because I watched it a lot. But yeah, I think
probably weird with your brother too.
Not
a little
as much.
less weird.
Not less weird. Yeah, he and I used to quote this movie a lot and stuff. So, yeah, definitely a movie that has issues, but it's been 15 years, so we've come a long way as a culture generally. Well, some of us have, and I think it's definitely one worth watching, and it has a real heart to it that makes it the exception a sex comedy that I actually enjoy and that actually is worthwhile. And I'm a very emotional person in general. I watched It Chapter 2 last night and cried at 2 a.m. when I was watching the end of that movie. So that's my thing. I tend to get emotionally invested in things generally. So this movie really hits home for me in a number of ways, as I mentioned. So I said so too many times, but thank you. So thank you, Kai, for coming on this episode to talk about this movie. Especially, like I said, I don't know who I would have had on for this thing instead. I would have just talked about a different movie, but thank you for coming on and letting me rattle off
Happy to be
in
here.
your direction for an hour and a half. Do you want to tell people where they can find you on social media or anywhere? What are you up to these days? I was like, not a whole lot. Becoming version 2.0
not very interesting right
on
now.
Amazon.
Yeah, Becoming version.
You're not trying to be sexy, man.
Becoming version 2.0 on Amazon. Still out there. Working on the audiobook.
Oh, yeah. You need to let me know, but Mike, the update on that.
And I am on bebold-bebrave.com, where my YouTube videos I used to do are there and archived. And I'm on Twitter at VaultKeyLLC. And, of course, you can find me on Facebook under my name and Instagram under my name. And, yeah. That's me.
That's what you have going on. So this has been a back-to-back Kai thing. Next week, as of the schedule at the moment, you're going to be hearing me and Caitlin Kennedy talking about The Quiet Man, which was an interesting movie, a nice change of pace for this show. And I love when guests bring on older movies like that I had never even seen. So stay tuned for that. We have a bunch of stuff coming up in the next few weeks. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Jojo Rabbit, Ball of Fire. And then Kai is back in August when I finally post the Can't Hardly Wait commentary we recorded in May. Yeah.
May?
April? May? It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's time is relative these days. Beyond that, if there's a lot of things in the cards, a lot of updates and changes and upgrades and whatever with the podcast. So bear with me during all of that, and hopefully we can make the show even better going forward throughout the summer.
Did you ever mention
reclaim 2020? What?
Did you ever mention on the podcast from before about the new update that's going on with
No,
the
not
podcast?
yet. Not yet. I need to figure that out.
Okay.
I haven't done a lot of that. I've been busy with stuff. We have a toddler. I have a full-time job. There's a lot of things going on. So yeah, stay tuned to Crooked Table Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher, all that stuff. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy the show, you can reach me on Twitter at Crooked Table. I think you may or may not still hear me say some of these things in the outro. I have to update that So thank you for listening. Until next time, I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CR double L K E D.